Hello and welcome to 21st Century Vitalism, podcast asking the question, what does it mean to be fully alive in the 21st century? How can we best embody that aliveness while dealing with the unique stressors that we face in this strange and potent time? I'm your host, Brett Kane. I'm a licensed massage therapist and mindfulness meditation instructor, and joining us this week on the show is professional surfer turned regenerative farmer Fergal Smith. Fergal is the founder of the Moyhill CSA Farm in Clare, Ireland, and we're going to be spending this next hour talking about what exactly regenerative agriculture is. This is something that right off the bat of the show I really wanted to include because I think it's important as we're talking about the state of the world and the very real and grim realities of the challenges that we're facing, to also balance it out with a healthy perspective of, hey, there's still hope. There's still opportunity to work with the situation as it is, and there are practices that we can actually bring into our lives that will help us actually create a sustainable and just future. To me, food systems are a huge part of that equation. So much of our carbon output is actually from the way that we have a relationship with the earth and with our food. So the idea of regenerative agriculture is a really interesting one to me, and I started this conversation not knowing very much about it. So this was a really fun talk for me to be able to pick somebody's brain who's been established in this world for so long, and we really get into like a lot of depth on what exactly we are able to do through our relationship to our food. So namely, what we're going to be talking about is how we can use animals in a way that respects the way that they've migrated for the past thousands and thousands, millions of years, to actually work with land in a way that generates more nutrition and more bioavailability. We talk about the implementation of planting trees in creative ways. We talk about the philosophies of what it means to be a steward of the land and how we can enter a reciprocal relationship and actually have a genuine communion with the space that we inhabit. We talk about the downsides of the organic movement, the desertification and the stripping of minerals from our soil, and the state of industrial agriculture, and how we can transition from where we are now to a more sustainable way, how you can incorporate some of these principles into your own life, and overall what it means to enjoy connecting with the earth, and how this can actually become a rich source of joy and meaning in our lives. So this is a really earthy conversation, and it's one that I think is far too late into the show. I really wish that this was something that's more present right off the bat, but better late than never. And Fergal is an amazing guide into this world, and y'all are gonna get a whole lot from this episode. So sharpen your pencils, get some paper, get ready to write some stuff down. I do have this things that he references in this, namely the people and some of the resources you can tap into are actually going to be on the website, 21stcenturyvitalism.com. If you go to this episode page, there's going to be a list of everything that's actually brought up in this conversation. So feel free to check that out. That's what we're going to be doing today, y'all. I hope things have been well. We are finally making the transition into fall. So it is the great harvest before the winter. So there's no better time for a conversation like this to be had. So yeah, that's what we're going to be doing today, y'all. I hope that you enjoy it. As much as I enjoyed recording with Fergal, it was really a treat for me. If you want to support the show, head on over to Apple Podcasts, leave us a 5-star review. Let me know what you're thinking. We got a Patreon. It's patreon.com/21stcenturyvitalism. Those rewards will be rolled out in the coming months once I get a little bit more steady viewership and I can kind of see what I'm working with. If you want to send me a one-time donation, if this episode gave you a sense of hope or sense of meaning, shoot me over $1, whatever. It's my Venmo is Brett-Kane-1. That's something new that I'm opening up if you feel inclined. Otherwise, no worries. You listening, you showing up and plugging into the content is good enough. That's what makes me happy. So we also got Facebook, we got Instagram, we got YouTube, we got all the things you can subscribe and interact with. So yeah, that's how you can get involved. Shoot me an email, 21stcenturyvitalism@gmail.com. Let me know what you're thinking. Do you want to be on the show? Do you have a friend who wants to be on the show? Whatever y'all are feeling, just let me know. That's how you can get involved without further ado, we're going to be talking with Fergal Smith. So open your hearts, drink some tea, do some stretches, and welcome, Fergal. Vitalism. I just want to start off by saying thank you. I know this is a super busy time of year for you, so I definitely do not take this sharing space lightly. How are you?
Yeah, it is, as you said, a busy time of year, but yeah, I'm hanging in there, and we're getting to the second half, as we say, of the season, so we're doing good.
Good. Yeah, so I'm just going to be honest with my disclosure in that I've always wanted agriculture of some kind to be present on the show, because as I was saying before the recording was on, I think it's really important for people when they're trying to develop a wellness-based life to understand the food systems that they're participating in. You know, we have effect with everything that we're purchasing and interacting with. And so I honestly kind of blindly just searched up regenerative agriculturalists, and I found your TED Talk on YouTube. And something about your story really charmed me in a way that I was just like, there's something about the fact that you had one goal in life from the time that you were a really young child, the professional surfer life, and then you were able to transition into something that you felt like had a little bit more meat on its bones. So I am really interested in just hearing a little bit more about your process of how you found your way to regenerative agriculture. I guess starting with the beginning, like what was the thing that really inspired you to do this?
Yeah, I suppose, a lot of people say it's so interesting that you came, on this surfing lifestyle and got into farming, but I have to remind people that, I grew up on an organic vegetable farm, so me going surfing was a strange thing. Me going back to farming is kind of actually almost quite normal and kind of safe for me. It's like, it's what I grew up doing. I have all my childhood memories are growing up helping my dad on the farm, and yeah, I always loved it, until I was probably 14, 16, I was there, helping all the time, and then surfing kind of took over, and had this mad dream of going off surfing, amazing waves around the world, and that was a pretty wild idea for a farm boy in, the west of Ireland with no, our family wouldn't have had a lot of money because primary, production, agriculture doesn't really make much money. So the idea that I was going to go off and chase waves around the world was a pretty far-fetched idea. But somehow I managed to do that, and I kind of worked. I think because I grew up on a farm, and, there's no such thing as, a day off in farming. You're on pretty much every day of the year. So I understand, things, if you want to do something, it takes hard work. So I didn't have the luxury of, I didn't grow up near the beach. We didn't have, excess income or anything, but I had the kind of dedication and the work ethic to try and see it through. And yeah, I plugged away, and, if you're determined and kind of focused or driven enough in anything in life, I think you will get there. And yeah, I also probably hit the surfing world at a good time where there was money in the industry, and I picked up sponsors from probably the age of like 16, 17, and yeah, kind of grew from there and got a little bit of money and traveled a bit, and yeah, I had these mad ideas of surfing the best waves in the world, and yeah, I ended up in Tahiti and Fiji and all these beautiful places, and then I was doing it, I was getting paid, I was surfing, and I suppose I'd come home and I would, my dad's still harvesting away, still going to the market every Thursday. He still is now. And nothing changed for him. And I was going up on this kind of surfing ladder of, getting more sponsorship and going on more flights. And you do, like, I suppose because my upbringing has me fairly kind of questioning, how people live and consume. And yeah, I suppose when I got to that point where I was actually making the dream a reality, it dawned on me, like, when have I made it? Do I need to do 10 more flights or 100 more flights or how many more waves? And how much money do I need to make? And so, yeah, there is no end to that rainbow. Like, that rainbow keeps stretching on as far as you can imagine. There's always a better wave. There's always more money. There's an endless amount of dreams after you kind of get to that place. So I kind of was doubting it for the last few years anyway, getting on another flight to do the same thing again. And don't get me wrong, there wasn't one bit of it that I didn't enjoy. I love traveling. I love surfing. I love, meeting all these lovely people around the world and cultures. And there wasn't a bad thing about it, but there was definitely an element of, doubt or guilt creeping in on about how much, can one person keep consuming just for myself. Like, I wasn't really helping anyone, I was giving money into some local communities, but I was probably causing I definitely was causing a more of a negative environmental impact by my my travels. So yeah, and then I was in Tahiti and I busted up my knee pretty bad, and I was lying there on a couch wondering if I was going to have to go home or not. And I was watching the news, sitting at a friend's house, and it was when the tsunami happened in Japan and the nuclear plant was sinking into the sea. And yeah, I was in the same ocean in Tahiti. It was just kind of like, wow, this is happening right now. And yeah, I'm just like, the world is obviously not in the best of shapes. And me getting on another flight, going surfing some more waves, isn't really helping things. And yeah, I just felt like, you know what, I need to get up off my ass and try and help, And it wasn't farming that I thought of instantly. I sat there for a few days going, what's the best thing I can do with my time? What's the best thing I can give my energy into and see the best effects? As I go to a third world country and, help aid workers and all these other nice Western ideas that kind of make us feel a bit, guilt-free that we helped the poor or something. But I was like, actually, the best thing I can do, and I know I can do, is grow food, and I can go back to where I'm from and help the community that I grow up in, and yeah, get people involved in it. At least I can genuinely know by growing food and feeding people, I have made a difference. That I knew was a tangible change. So that was the initial kind of wake-up call, and then literally from that day, sitting on the couch in Tahiti, that was it. Surfing career was finished. I emailed all my family, emailed all my sponsors, and I said, that's it, I'm done. I'm tapping out. And obviously everyone thought I was a little bit crazy and lost my marbles. And my mum even convinced me, she's like, well, you're on the other side of the world now. You might as well stay there for a little while longer until you come back. And I was like, that's a good point. So I did. I stayed for another 2 months and had a great summer, and then that was it. I pretty much tapped out. I haven't flown since. And that's nearly 10 years ago now. And yeah, lost all my sponsors pretty quickly because of that. And it was lovely though, because the sponsors, it's a company, but the people you're dealing with are humans. And the humans I was dealing with were like, totally respected my decision, really backed me, were like, you're so right, we need to do more, but sorry, the company isn't going to change its whole business plan around your little whims. So yeah, that was kind of the end of my surfing. No, I had a few sponsors that helped me for a few years, so I had a transition period then when I was still getting some money from surfing, and then I was going into farming. And yeah, so then I thought about farming, and I was like, yeah, I want to go back and feed people, but also it's about what's the best thing I can do, and how can my farming make the biggest impact. And I grew up on an organic vegetable farm, like I said, and I know that's, it was at the time, it was probably the best version that anyone knew of. But I was like, I want to actually have a bigger effect. I don't want to just be organic without chemicals. I want to, make the ecosystems at their best, make them thrive and make, the wildlife and everything around where I farm as good as it can be. And that's where I kind of went down the rabbit hole of learning about regenerative agriculture. And yeah, the more I kind of still delve into that, it's the next level of where we need to be focusing our farming attention. It's organic is not even close to good enough. Organic is just taking away chemicals. And my dad and others who would be early adopters would be very passionate about the organic system and really trying to do the best for nature. But the organic label has been a little bit hijacked by industry, and supermarkets are able to charge a higher price because it doesn't have chemicals. They're not interested in regenerating the land. They're not interested in making the world a better place. They're just creating a new niche product. Whereas regenerative agriculture is basically saying that year on year, that soil, that ecosystem is going to get better. That to me, really excited me. And that's where I've kind of been pushing all my energy, day and night beyond. I grew up in vegetable growing, so that's what I started with. And that's what I do on a day-to-day, and that's what we sell in the markets. But vegetable growing generally is on a small scale because you don't need a huge amount of land to grow a lot of produce when you do it quite intensively. So, how are we going to manage the landscapes? How do we manage huge tracts of land? And to be honest, horticulture by its nature isn't a regenerative enterprise at all, because it's very human created. It's a man-made thing where I'm going to decide to grow vegetables in this piece of land. I'm going to input, compost, green manures, lots of energy, loads and loads of inputs, loads and loads of time, and then I'm going to take out vegetables. And that happens year in, year out. In with compost, out with vegetables, and it goes back and forth. And it can be done really well. Like we do a no-dig system, so there's no tilling, no ploughing, no machines. It's done, as sensitively as possible. It's the best for the soil you can do, but it's a huge labor input system, which isn't a regenerative system. You can be regenerating land, but it's done with huge inputs, energy inputs. So that is always going to have to happen. So we'll do it as best we can. People want fresh vegetables, so that will happen. But how do we manage the whole landscape? And as I said, vegetables don't manage the landscapes in a regenerative way because they need so much inputs. So if you look at it on a bigger holistic view, you're looking at this huge landscape, the whole globe, the whole planet. How does it get managed? And before, us humans were creating private property and all these different enterprises and things that happen in towns and cities. It was animals that managed it. Animals have roamed across this planet for a long, long time, and that is what has built the soil that we are surviving on today. So if people don't understand exactly how that works, but basically it's complex. And what I'd first say is what really got me into all of this is holistic management. And holistic management is a great kind of decision-making toolkit, how to manage complex systems. It's not essentially for farming, but it's been designed around farming, but it could be used for anything. But it's a way of breaking down the complex and trying to manage the whole system, the humans, the animals, the land, trying to manage it all, which is quite a hard thing to do. So it's an amazing management tool. And it was created by a man called Alan Savory, and there's the Savory Institute now, which is a global network, and which is thankfully really taking off and getting great recognition. But Alan Savory is an amazing man who, he did a lot of work in Africa and was a biologist and was, studying the wildlife parks and nature reserves and watching land degrade. And it was degrading, and they were fencing off land from, no hunting and all this. And you need to listen to his story because it's really interesting. But basically, he's observed nature on a big scale, and if animals move in the correct way, the way they always have, the way they did for thousands of years, that's what keeps a healthy ecosystem. If you remove animals from the land and restrict their movements, land degrades. And like desertification is a man-made creation, basically, is what he says. And desertification can be reversed and completely changed and stopped by the right movements of animals. So
could you define desertification? Just for the folks who might not be familiar with that concept?
Yeah, so a lot of land is probably one of the biggest threats to humanity that people maybe don't even realize. But because of our plough agriculture, tilling agricultural system, and poor animal management, or just basically poor management practices, full stop, we're releasing huge amounts of carbon every year. Land is, you hear about, soil washing away after floods and wind blowing up, soil erosion, wind blowing soil off fields when they've been ploughed. So we're losing huge amounts of topsoil, and every year you do that, we're losing organic matter, and organic matter is basically like a sponge. And the more organic matter you have, the more sponge you have to hold water, and then you can grow plants. But every time you lose your organic matter and your carbon, you're losing this sponge, so your soil is getting drier and drier, and eventually, there's no organic matter left, and nothing wants to grow, and it'll blow away in the wind or any kind of rain, it'll wash it away. And that's what's happening to a huge amount of land. In the Great Prairies in America, where there was 9 meters of topsoil when they first went there, now they're down to 1 foot of topsoil in the good places, I think, at this stage. So if you imagine, what kind of mining has been done by the plough agriculture system, it's quite phenomenal in a short amount of time. But the 9 meters of topsoil was created by animals. And that's kind of the ironic thing in this kind of, we've got a big kind of issue going on is industrial agriculture of animals is causing desertification as well. And, obviously the growing of crops and grains for animals is just a complete disaster. But
it's
animals,
a weird backwards system.
Yeah, we're doing so many double negatives there, it just doesn't even add up. But someone in the middle is getting paid for it, and that's the reason why it exists. But if we allowed animals to do what they've always done, which is herd animals, a cool thing to know is that cows, a herd of cows isn't a herd until it's over 80. They don't act as a proper herd until there's 80 or more. But, realistically, in the wild, there would have been thousands, buffalo and elk and all these different roaming herd animals, and there'd be thousands of them, and they'd be roaming across the land with predators behind them. The predators, and that's how a herd, protects itself. It's big, it stays together really tight, and then the weak or the young might get taken, and that's, natural selection kind of thing. But the herd is moving, and it goes into areas with, big long grass, and stampedes in there, and they're eating really fast, really quickly, and doing huge amounts of trampling and dung and urinating, all in intense applications. But then they're gone. Like, they're literally there for maybe 2 hours or 4 hours or 20 minutes because they're getting chased by predators all day, all night. So they keep moving. And then they don't end up back at that location for maybe, 2 months, 3 months, who knows. They basically just keep following where there's really good food for themselves. So they just keep moving all the time. And if we mimic that, so the tricky thing now is we have all these, fences and private property and we don't have huge herds of that. So we all have smaller tracts of land with small herds of animals. So it's a little bit frustrating trying to mimic that when we don't have the same, we don't have the same landscape as we did, but we can mimic it on a small scale. So here on our farm, we have about 65 acres. We've got about 7 cows and 45 sheep, which is, a tiny little amount of animals. But we mimic that on a small scale. We go around our farm in about a 35-day rotation, 40-day rotation at the moment. But they go into a little paddock, and they're never there for more than a day. Sometimes they do moves twice a day, but generally it's just once a day. So every day they go into a new paddock, and then they come back around, and when they come back around to the start, the grass is fully regrown. It's pretty basic. Anyone who's not a farmer gets it almost, but farmers have been doing, very different versions where they basically just leave them in huge fields for weeks at a time. And then then grass when it grows and gets eaten, after 3 days, it starts regrowing again. And once it starts regrowing again, if an animal is in there, the animal will eat the regrowth straight away, because that's the nice sweet sugar on top. And if it does that, it starts depleting the root reserves underneath the ground. So you need your animals off the land as soon as you've grazed it. So, yeah, but it's very simple. You move off where they just grazed and you don't come back until it's fully regrown. And that's it. It's not actually that's, complex, but there's a whole load of management in that, and the best time of year to have animals in certain fields. And, it gets really fun, you get really into the little details of moving your animals around. But it's so cool because every year you're seeing your land get better, and your animals will never be sick. Well, you don't want to say never, but realistically, if you every day eat fresh, fully recovered, good, healthy mixed sward of, vegetation, your animals just walk in every morning so happy. They're like, wow, this is amazing. And at the end of the day, they've eaten, half of it, and the next day you bring them into 100% fresh grass again. But if you leave animals in a field for 2 weeks, the first day they ate the best. The second day they ate B grade, and then the third day they're on C grade. By week 2, they're really scraping the barrel, and now they're eating around their own dung and urine. That's when all the parasites, that's when farmers then have to worm and, do all these vaccinations, and all these problems start arising because we're not mimicking how animals used to move. That's basically, regenerative agriculture. And now there's a whole other part of integrating trees, because, an argument that people often say is, we should just plant more trees to save the world and, store more carbon. And I'm totally for that. We've planted about nearly 30,000 trees on this small little farm. And that seems like, where's all your land if you're going to plant that many trees? But you can actually integrate trees, so many trees, and still have pasture. So we have, thicker hedges. We split the fields up into little laneways to make little microclimates, so they're protected by the wind. And then you're also having tree roots coming under your pastures, which makes your pastures a lot more robust, in adverse weather in the wintertime. So you integrate trees, and that's, people think before humans were here and we cleared all the trees, we would have just had forest everywhere. And we would have had a lot of forest, but actually they now believe that it would have been like wood pasture. So there'd be, trees and pasture, and that's how, herd animals again would have been hiding in trees from predators, and they'd come out into clearings and eat loads of grass and then go again. And that's kind of more the way I'm trying to lay out our farm, where there's always tree cover, because animals don't want to stand out in the pouring rain and wind, or they don't want to be out in the blasting sun. So trees are a really, a good tool to have as a farmer, and it does store carbon, and it is a way to bring in more biodiversity, and it's another food as well. Most trees are really palatable to animals. So there's all these benefits, but there's no we just need to plant trees and the world's fixed, or it's not just about grazing animals. It's this complex synergy between, the wild animals, the animals that we're minding to manage the ecosystem. There's so many different things, the water cycle, there's all this stuff going on. That's, it's basically, it's like magic. You're watching nature nature wants to, thrive. It wants to be at its best. And if we can try and observe how it wants to be at its best, you can really see it lift off. Whereas farmers do a lot of kind of controlled farming, where they're killing things all the time, killing weeds and, stopping this. And it's really about control and keeping it a certain way. Whereas, if we can try and do a lot more observation and use the tools that are a bit more biological rather than technical, because that's a real modern day thing of thinking a technological tool is going to fix our problems, whereas nature was thriving very, very happily for a long, long time. And in the space of, less than 100 years, we've done a whole pile of damage with a lot of technology. So, you got to, there's amazing technology out there, and it is used in regenerative agriculture in lots of ways. But we should really focus on using as much biological means than, humans with their technological ones, because they're not even tried and tested long enough to really warrant, are they that good? Whereas we know animals can build soil, and we know trees are good in the right place. And there's some really amazing farmers out there now that are down this road a lot further than I am. I'll mention Gabe Brown would be a great regenerative farmer in the States, and Greg Judy is another guy that I would follow a lot. And these guys, they're managing huge tracts of land, thousands of acres with big herds of animals, and the results are phenomenal. And there's the amazing thing about it is there's no cost. There's very little cost, there's very little inputs. You're really just, doing a little bit of management of moving your animals around, making sure they have access to water, and they do all the work, and nature thrives. So it's very exciting. And the cool thing is that and the more this catches on to farmers is they don't really have to invest anything. It's really just a change of thought and a change of way of looking, a slight change of management. It's not like you have to invest in a new tractor or all these sheds. There's none of these, costs involved in regenerative agriculture that are in industrial agriculture. So it's a kind of exciting idea that in the flick of a switch, with a different way of management, we could be making ecosystems, come back to life and start thriving. And I suppose I could talk about this all day long, but actually, if people are interested in it, it's cool to go and research it and look what Alan Savory's been doing for the last 60 years in Africa. Like, he took a piece of land in Africa that they couldn't find a blade of grass. There was nothing there. And now it's got more wildlife and more rare species of animals than any, national park. And he's only done it by moving animals. And you can't really spoof those kind of results and that turnaround. And it's interesting because animals have got such bad press, and they've got such a bad, reputation in the environmental world. But it's just kind of, and they're right in so many ways, because animals are causing a lot of damage. But that's not the animal's fault. That really comes down to the humans' decisions around how they manage them. So that's kind of where I'm at, and that's what I'm up to. And so I do the vegetables day to day, and that pays, to keep the farm afloat, because realistically, animal enterprises do need larger acreage, to be viable enterprises. But that's the side of the farm that I really enjoy, and hopefully in time we might get to lease more land and expand those enterprises as well. But it's exciting. It's an exciting world to be getting into, and I'm only 10 years ago, I think next year, that I actually decided to stop my mad pro surfing world. So I feel like I've just got to a place now where it's kind of getting really quite exciting with the potential on the farm here. And hopefully a big part of what I want to do is involve more people in it and teach people the kind of basics around this, and hopefully get more farmers catching on to this exciting world of rejuvenating land and watching it take off without the need of external inputs.
It's amazing to me because we're kind of in this global society right now where there's a lot of concern, specifically with climate change, and a lot of the information that we're getting is that it's kind of like, okay, we're kind of doomed. We don't really know what to do about this. But this kind of is like striking like a bit of like hope and inspiration in my heart, that it's interesting when like humans learn how to flow with nature rather than try and dominate nature. Like it kind of course corrects itself, and there's actually regulatory systems inherent within the system. Like if we just let animals do what animals do, then they're kind of like the agents of like health for the ecosystem. And I'm just kind of curious, with the amount of strain that's currently on the food systems, where most people don't even know a farmer anymore. Like before, like it was, everybody had like a community farmer who was able to provide produce, but now we're so disconnected from the way that we get our food, and we have these huge industrial systems. Is it possible that is incorporating some of these principles into these massive institutionalized agriculture systems, is that going to be able to produce the same kind of produce, or is this, are people going to have to kind of reclaim their relationship to the land and actually invest in local farmers as well? Or can we simply include this into the system that's already there and then have the same kind of output?
Yeah, I think it's every part of it's possible. Like I think the big massive farms, if they actually practice regenerative agriculture, they would be the best farms, because when you have a bigger land mass and a bigger herd, you're going to have a bigger effect. So, you don't often hear bigger is better, and it's not something that I would usually think is a good idea. But actually with land and with animals, like the bigger the herd, the bigger the impact and the bigger the benefit. So now, I think it can be done on a big scale, but then, we do need more farmers. And the more farmers that are clued in and connected, as you say, it connects more people in the locality directly to their food. It brings up the kind of conscious awareness of where their food comes from. And more people, there just needs to be more people on the land. Like it just genuinely does. Like I remember hearing a fact or an idea of a statistic a good few years ago that 1 in 3 people need to be fairly, directly involved in food in a country, so it's stable. Because, it's the most important thing for the ecosystem and our human health. And it should be, it's 1% of the population in the UK and Ireland that are involved in agriculture now. And that's not a good, ratio. And but then at the same time, people don't realize that we think we're being fed by industrial agriculture, but actually still today, 60 to 70% of the world's food is produced by small farms. So people don't even realize this. And they don't have a voice. But they're the people who actually feed us. It's only in the small populations of the Western world that we have industrial agriculture. Majority of the world is still on small scale, human, hand kind of scale. And so it's not like the whole world is in an industrial state. Now, obviously, they're doing their damn hardest to get industrial agriculture everywhere if they can, but it's still in human hands. We just don't realize it. But in the Western world, we need a lot more. Like, if tomorrow people decided they wanted to eat regenerative food, they would all starve because it doesn't exist, because there isn't enough regenerative farmers. In the Western world, we do not have enough people on the ground. It's a few big farms with machines, and they're generally industrial, kind of conventional farms. So my only, I'd be very optimistic. I've never been so optimistic, actually, in the state of the potential and, where it's going, like with the kind of collapsism that's going on with our globalized food system, also brings this huge potential for, farmers going a different way. But anyway, that's very positive. My snag is, who are these farmers? Because the conventional, conditioned farmers, it is going to be hard for them to shift. Now, eventually they may have to be forced to shift financially or whatever, but it's hard to admit you're wrong and change what you're doing. So a lot of the change is going to have to come from new, different way of thinking people. And this is where I am focusing my energy. Is like, I want to help more people who are already interested, but they, they haven't grown up on a farm, or they don't have access to land or whatever. They need the training, and they ain't going to get the training from any, agricultural college right now. So we need to upskill a lot of people in a short space of time to kind of take on, managing land in a regenerative way. And it's exciting, but it's also quite a big challenge. And unfortunately, most Westerners have been sold a dream of go to college, get the high paying job. So they haven't been encouraged that land management and regenerative agriculture is even on the radar for most young people. And that's what I'm kind of trying to, is get people who are genuinely keen and give them the leg up and the supports to, not make mistakes, because managing land and ecosystems, you're managing a lot of lives, like a lot of little creatures and big animals and water and, communities' food and all these things that it's, it couldn't be of more of a serious job that people don't realize. Like, it's way more important than, I would say, even doctors or dentists that get these, more high paying salaries. Like, you're managing a huge ecosystem, and it's complex, and we need people who are got their shit together, they're, confident, they're physical, they can organize, they can manage logistics. There's a lot to going into managing a big, land base. And these are the people that I'm hoping to get more involved and help them along the road, because it's a big undertaking. We've got a big job ahead of us to turn around our ecosystems that are struggling and our wildlife that is struggling. And we can have environmental groups and environmentalists shouting about it, which is great, but who are the people trained up to manage the system? That would be my concern in this next 10, 15 years, is like getting those people the right experience. If I could train up someone and then go, this person's qualified, they can manage, that 500 acres and stand over them. But, there isn't that many people who have that experience out there. So that's just a challenge I think we have. And there's definitely going to be people rising to that challenge, and it's exciting.
Yeah, I think one of the big problems that I notice here in the States is a lot of people are motivated by profit. And, it's kind of instilled in us at a very young age, in order to be a player in this society, you got to have the ducats, you got to have some money. And that's not really one of the promises of getting into, any form of agriculture, let alone one that is still kind of growing and getting its legs. But what I'm noticing, I have a lot of friends who are farmers. It's not my direct trade. I'm starting to get more inspired to be like, oh man, that is actually really good. There is a wealth that actually comes with it, though. And it might not be material, you have a paper currency, but like the fact that you are creating this relationship with land and stewarding an organic health from like the soil on up, like there's a level of connectivity and like something about the human experience that greatly, I think, is needing of that. Like we need that connectivity to the earth and the ability to create community around food. And I just don't think like our cultural values, at least here in the States, even have any room for that. Right now we're so individually focused. And how do we inspire people to kind of look beyond? This might be beyond what you're, trained to do, but as an educator, how do you find it? How do we inspire people to see the value in this?
Yeah, like I think it's only going to be, enticing to certain people. But I already see that I have a lot more people interested than I could possibly, involve. So what I'm really working on at the moment is I'm in the middle of trying to build a training center. So in the next year, I'm hoping to have that built, because I don't want to cobble together, kind of, poor farmer training, just trying to basically run it on the fly. Whereas we're trying to get a grant from a local agency, and then we're going to build a professional building. So bring farmers through and go, you're going to be a professional. And we're in a professional building, and this is showing them, the marketing, the business, the whole ecology, what you're managing, all of this to try and raise farmers up. So I used to do a lot of having interns and volunteers, and I've actually stopped it because I want to get a bit more serious about what we're doing here and actually level up the level of training. And so I see there's a lot more interest than there is capacity to train people. So that's a good thing. But the issue is the interest is great, but unless it's got proper grounded base of giving people the right tools and the real experience, people having keenness, they're going to fall flat in their face. And that's unfortunately is going to happen to a lot of people unless they get the kind of wide-eyed opening of what it takes to manage a complex system. But as you said, there really isn't a financial reward, unfortunately, to this industry. But the kind of benefits you can't explain, and I think anyone who kind of dabbles in it will start to kind of feel it on some level. But I don't feel like I'm working. I'm going to be up at 4:30 in the morning. I'm going to work all day. I'll probably finish at 10 o'clock at night. And I'll do it every day. And no one's going to give me an extra paycheck or a pat in the back or anything. But I jump out of bed every single morning. Can't wait to do what I do. And you're not working anymore. You're just a part of something. You're just now, you are like the bees flying past you, or the birds, or the plants in the ground. We're all just acting our parts, and that feeling of that is kind of something you can't describe. And it's feeling connected, feeling involved, feeling of purpose, feeling that you're doing something that's of real benefit. It's if you don't wake up in the morning, plants are going to die, animals are going to die, so you kind of just get up and you start doing it. And it could be pouring rain, or it could be a heat wave. It doesn't change. And it's I kind of almost feel sorry for people that don't get those feelings, because it's kind of priceless. It's people just think I'm crazy and I don't ever switch off, and I'm a workaholic and I'd never take a holiday. But I don't really want to go anywhere. And the thing is, I've done it as well. It's not like so a lot of farmers are like this and they think they're crazy, and I don't at all anymore. I never did. But I also did it. I also had the flying around the world, pay to go surfing, and I'm choosing to be doing this. So people can't think that it's poor me working my ass off, making no money. It's I actually had the other version, and I could have probably kept that going if I really wanted to. But actually, there's far more depth and meaning, and it's there's something way more substantial, when you're a part of a bigger system. Every year watching your trees that you planted that are now another 2 or 3 feet taller. It's these little subtle feelings that kind of more powerful than any bank balance anyway.
Love that so much. That's so good. I'm kind of curious, for the folks who might not have the ability to go in on a plot of land. There's a lot of people who live in urban centers, myself included, who maybe have a yard, or maybe even some people who have up to 40 acres and they are already working full-time jobs. Are there certain principles that they can bring into the space that they actually have a little bit of say over, that can actually tap them into this deeper feeling of connectivity with their space?
Totally, definitely, the market gardening can be done on a real small scale, anything, any scale really, but even a quarter of an acre or more, and you can be a very busy bee every day of the week and produce a lot of food. And as I said, you can do market gardening extremely well, that's regenerative by its actions. It just does take a lot of labor. And you are involved in the ecosystem then, and you're sucked in. And end of the day, we all need fresh veg, so that's why it's what I do, 9 to 5 every day of the week. So it's, most people can get into that. If you can't get into that at all, then it's go and support the local farm that is doing it, and it might be you might be able to volunteer there, so you get some connection. Or you can just literally give them, your dollars by buying their stuff. If you can't have that, it's like going you can go research the closest kind of regenerative farm to your area and go and just emailing, buy some stuff off them, taste it, and then, support them. Give them an email or a phone call and tell them keep up what you're doing, because they're not getting supports from, any governments, or, they're not really getting supported in any way presently. So the more people that give farmers the kind of feeling that they are respected and because a lot of farmers are feeling quite beaten down, whereas, because environmentalists are telling farmers that they've been destroying the ecosystem. But if you find the one, and then farmers, just by being a farmer, get kind of thrown in with the dirty dishwater kind of thing. But if you find a good farmer and just, support them. If you have the money, give them a donation, why not? Because they're managing ecosystems that keep us all with clean air, clean water, and the more, it's, in some ways, we'd be better off spending our time lifting up the farms that are already doing it. Because if you can make a farm that's already doing it, a real success, and it gets right up there, and financially it starts to do well, then other farmers start to see it, and they're like, "Oh, hang on a second, they're getting so much local support, they're getting more money than we are. I want to do what they're doing." So you can actually cause a big, rather than us all trying to become farmers and us all down at the bottom kind of struggling, if you get some guy that's already nailing it, doing it really well, and then you lift them up a bit more, it's going to make the conventional farmers next door, start getting pretty jealous, because, farmers will follow the money. If there's more money in it that way, they'll start to question things. And, there's lots of things you can do, even just research, to start looking up what regenerative agriculture really means, and then asking, the farmers markets, what are they doing, or going into supermarkets, why don't you stock some, food from this farm that's whatever, trying to get these conversations going, because it is still in its early stages. But at the same time, there's nobody that doesn't support it, because regenerative agriculture is kind of breaking the boundaries of organic. Organic got pretty pigeonholed into a niche, kind of well-to-do people buying organic produce a lot of the time, whereas regenerative agriculture is kind of it's looking after, our water, our ecosystem. It's kind of, we're building soil. It's kind of bigger topics, and I think everyone wants our water to be cleaner. Everyone wants our soil to be getting better. So you can't piss people off with talking about having a better ecosystem, even if they're a chemical farmer or whatever. So you can actually, I think it's a good time. You can actually bring these conversations to anyone, and everyone wants, to try and help with climate change or ecosystem collapse or whatever. So I think, regenerative agriculture is filling that kind of phase, that conversation quite well. And if you can mention then flagship farms, like I was saying, like Abe Brown and Greg Judy and Joel Salatin is another one, they, to other farmers who don't maybe know, and they can research them, because it's hard for someone who doesn't know much about agriculture to tell a farmer what to do. That doesn't go down very well. But if you could tell a farmer, just check out Gabe Brown or something like this, and then they see a real farmer doing it on a real scale, and they're really doing it, and they're making a profit, they'll take that a bit more on board. So we can, I think there's many ways in that people can help and be involved, and it's kind of whatever suits it. If you're a marketing guru, you could go and contact a regenerative farmer and say, "Do you want me to help with marketing for you?" Or there's a million things we can do to help. So you don't have to get out there and start farming tomorrow to make the world a better place. We obviously need more farmers, but we can all play our bit, that's for sure.
So something else that I always kind of thought it was the same thing, admittedly. Where's the comparison and contrast between regenerative agriculture and permaculture? Because I hear a lot more about permaculture than I do what you're offering. So are there a lot of similarities, or?
Yeah, no, like the permaculture principles are brilliant. They really are. They're all similar to the regenerative agriculture principles. I suppose permaculture, it kind of came out of like a bit more small scale, and it's kind of got more adopted in like backyard kind of scale, and more in horticulture kind of management, and a bit less kind of production orientated, which isn't a bad thing, but it's not being taken up wide. Even the systems, the way it's laid out, it isn't designed in a way. It's more designed to having people talk about having a food forest and these kind of ideas, edible gardens and stuff, which are amazing. But industrial agriculture and farmers are just like, goodbye. Like that isn't, that's not on their radar. Like they're plowing 1,000 acres of corn in a straight line, and you mention to them about a food forest, and they're just gonna laugh at you. So, and realistically, we're not going to turn the world into permaculture, because it would mean all of us being like kind of really into it. It's like everyone having a little quarter of an acre or 10 acres, but they're kind of integrate little, it's not very linear or easy for harvesting or management in that way. And unfortunately, when we're selling or producing food now for, millions of people in housing estates and cities, and it's going through supermarkets, we need to be designing systems that are manageable, that can be quantifiable, that we can, manage big complex systems quite simply. But yeah, the same, it is a lot of the exact same ideas. It's just on a kind of different maybe scale, and different ways of, it's a lot of permaculture is a lot about nice ideas, like having loads of nuts and berries and all this perennial foods. At the end of the day, a lot of people don't eat half of these foods. Realistically, most humans eat 10 foods, and the adventurous vegetarian eats about 20 foods. Whereas there's 80,000 plants that we can eat. But you could have, you could have a couple hundred plants growing behind your house that could feed people their diet year round, but most people will be like, where are the carrots? And that's all they want to eat. So it's, there's lovely ideas in permaculture, but the reality is not all of it is that applicable to reality in feeding the masses. But it's a great system. But regenerative agriculture is kind of, again, it's broken the organic and the permaculture, like, it's a bit left field, it sits over there. Regenerative agriculture is, you could be a farmer with, 1,000 head of cows, and you can be the best regenerative agriculture farm in the area. And you could be a poultry farmer, and you could be a regenerative farmer, or you could be, you could be a grain farmer, no-till and all that, which is great, which isn't, it can be done. So it's a bit more applicable to the general farmers that are there. And I just think it's more realistic as well. There's genuine, proper results out of regenerative agriculture, whereas permaculture is a bit hit or miss. Loads of great ideas. Managed well, it can be done great, but it's not an easy system to adopt on a wide scale. So that's kind of,
Yeah. I mean, it seems like for the amount of people, we have millions of mouths to be feeding, to have something that we can have more of a guaranteed, like we really can't gamble on, millions of families potentially going hungry, like, oh, we had like a mishap. So that definitely makes sense. Something that I've heard a lot about, and I really wanted to get a specialist on this, but you may be able to kind of walk me through this, is something about like what do they call it? It's like the soil, there's kind of like a soil apocalypse potentially, at least here in the States, where a lot of the soil that we have is starting to become like inert essentially. And I know that regenerative agriculture can help kind of reframe this and heal that. But do you know anything about like the current state of soil as it is, and potentially how long we have in order to like really make this transition without there being a huge mishap in food?
Yeah, it's a pretty dire conversation, and like I've people in this world who are doing regenerative agriculture kind of just, at this stage, is just put the head down and keep trying to be positive in what we're doing. But yeah, industrial agriculture, where it's at and what people are, facing, as I said, it was 9 meters of topsoil down to a foot, but that's, could be a couple of inches in a lot of places. And eventually, yeah, it's just the soil. The soil in a lot of places is virtually dead, and they're growing through chemicals. They're growing their food with the inputs of chemicals. Without the chemicals, nothing would grow. So that's where a lot of industrial kind of farm, grain farms and stuff would be at, and it's pretty dire, and it's not going to get any better in the current management. So, is it next year? Is it 5 years? Is it 20 years? But it's not going to last, indefinitely. So, yeah, something's got to give. And the big issue with the big kind of plough agriculture systems is the absence of animals. Like the land had animals on it for, forever. And for now the last 100 years, animals have been absent. So we've just been mining, the soil's energy bank to the point now where it's essentially empty, and now we're riding on thin air with some synthetic fertilizers that are just about growing a crop poorly each year and making us all pretty sick in the process. So it's a pretty dead end journey for that side of agriculture, and unfortunately, we're creatures of reaction, and we actually need the collapse or the problem to then change. As long as we can get away with it, we seem to keep going. There's been something like 16 civilizations that have become extinct already, and the only thing we learn from history is we don't learn from history. We keep repeating, making ourselves extinct until we have to. So it's going to be pretty serious, and there's no doubt. But also, we needed to get serious for people to really learn. And unfortunately, we actually need that big of a wake-up call, because we've been told all the information, we've been given all the little signs and the wake-up calls prior to this, but it seems that we need a proper wake-up call. So, that's going to happen anyway. I don't think there's too much we can change about certain people who want that to continue, but alongside that, the positive is happening. It genuinely is happening, and on quite a big scale already. And that's the where we need that tide to start filling quicker and more people adopting. So then when there is that kind of catastrophic, and it won't happen in, a week or a month, it'll happen over a series of years where it's just not working anymore. And then the other one will just, start speeding up. So that's where I come back to, is I want to get more and more people really trained up that they can help in this kind of big change, because that's what we need. We need more people who aren't afraid to manage complex, big, ecosystems. And that's what I would say to, people out there is, who are those people? And if you have any interest, it's, we need more people. It's like, we have armies, but I don't know what we need armies for, really, because they just kill each other. But we need armies of people who are going to actually save us. And if that was what the army's job was, that they're going to take over huge amounts of land and manage it really well and put all the money that goes into wars into regenerative agriculture, geez, the army would be great. But we kind of need a whole wave of people who are taking it seriously, going to really work their heart outs into doing this, because it's not going to be easy. We have depleted our soils to zero in a lot of places, and it's going to take a lot of work. But nature wants to thrive. Nature is going to want to bounce back. As soon as it's been giving a bit of attention in what it needs, and really helping to turn around, it'll right its its wrongs very quickly, and it'll come in a positive direction. And yeah, you look at Gay Brown and Greg Judy, and they have those stories. They took land that was worth nothing, nobody wanted, and they now have, lush, amazing pastures and ecosystems. So it's White Oak Pasture is another great one. I just thought of them when I was thinking there. But so it's hugely serious, but it's also what we need for the catalyst for change. So I've kind of given up on being upset about it, because unfortunately we seem to need a serious wake-up call. We just need the people to be coming on board that are going to make the changes. And I suppose I meant to say earlier, and you can do the holistic management training online. You don't have to go. It's a 9-day course if it's on a farm, but you can do it online now. But the number one philosophy that Alan Savory has is, when you go into any decision, but certainly when you go out into an ecosystem and you go to make a decision about, I'm going to plant a tree here, or I'm going to, make a pond there, you must start off with assuming that you're probably going to be wrong. And you're probably going to make the wrong decision, and that's okay. Like you gather your information, you make the best plan that you can, but be humble enough to realize that it's probably going to be the wrong decision, and then you monitor and you're watching it to be wrong. You're not going to try and prove that you're right. You're going to accept it's probably wrong, and then as it's going wrong, I'm going to change it, and then it'll probably still be wrong, and then I'll monitor it, and then I'll get it a bit better. But nature's going to show us if it's right or wrong, and then we have to be humble enough to be able to be wrong, and then go, right, I messed up there, I'll do it this way now. And I think that's one of the fundamental, ways we need to go forward, is that farmers at the moment are doing things that are essentially, are killing nature in many ways, but we're not able to be humble enough to go, yeah, this is not working, and admit that what I've been doing is wrong, and what else can I do that's better. But yeah, even if you're a regenerative agriculture, through and through kind of farmer, it doesn't mean you're going to make the right decision at all. You might make the complete wrong decision, but at least if you can keep humble enough in that be wrong, mess it up, that's okay, and then change and keep going. And I think that's a philosophy that anyone getting into it has to understand, that you're not going to come in all, I'm going to save the day and turn this land into a perfect paradise. You could easily mess it up as bad as, someone spraying chemicals all day long, because it's complex. It's not as simple as I'll do this and it'll be better. So if we can keep that headspace that we're not God, we're not able to predict how we're going to manage this. We're just going to try our best, and it could be okay, it could be not so good, and then we're going to adapt, and we're going to keep doing that round and round, and then we have half a chance. I think that's where we kind of need to get to. And I think that maybe might stand for a lot of society and businesses and governments and all this kind of stuff. Is just, it's okay to be wrong, and it's okay to admit we're wrong, and just try and do better next time. And nature will show us. Like, once the water is getting cleaner, once the soil is getting deeper, we know we're doing okay. But if it isn't, and there's less insects every year, something's not right. And at the moment, there's a lot of things not right. Our water is definitely not getting cleaner, our air is not getting cleaner, so we have to admit what we're doing is actually not working, and then start trying something different. And that's kind of the basis of holistic management and Alan Savory's philosophy. And I think, yeah, it's a lovely way to kind of go out into the world and, yeah, try and just be humble enough to try and learn and take one step at a time and stand back and see how it's working. Yeah.
I love that. It's almost like a spiritual practice at that point, like being humble enough to be able to admit that, I can be wrong. I'm definitely fallible, and allowing nature to actually teach you. I mean, that's something you can bring into like every element of your life, and I think that's a big reason why people end up getting solidified into their positions in whatever they're doing, any creative passion, a musician, or, especially like a politician or something. When you have a very concrete feedback mechanism built into the thing you're doing, that's like, hey, this is wrong. You don't like try and fit it into a box of it being right. You have to move with that and allow it to change you, but yeah, I just always wonder, humanity's ability to allow change within itself, and I love that this has that kind of built into it, what a better teacher.
Totally. Yeah, it's a very Yeah, it's a very kind of spiritual or kind of eye-opening, journey once you allow it to be, because you're just going on the ride of watching and observing, and then you're just a tool in the process of trying to help things move in a positive direction. And yeah, it's really, it teaches you not to have fixed ideas, and I think that's really healthy. And I think, if nothing else, if people want to get into farming for a bit of a psychological journey, it's definitely good for, because you're doing really long days, hard work physically, and then you got to admit that what you're doing it was wrong that day. And it's pretty shit. You might have been doing something for ages, and then you're like, yeah, that wasn't the way to do it. And, it can hurt. Like, you're like, oh man, I just thought I had it nailed, and I've actually completely just blew it, and now I have to do it different. And you mightn't even get a chance to do it in that season. You now have to wait 6 months until the next season to try it out a different way. So it's real, like, it's long-term stuff. And, you might then see results for a few years even to see if it's turning the right direction. And that's the big stuff where now it goes way beyond you. And all you're really doing is kind of learning a few things along this journey to hopefully pass on to the next generation. And then you're starting to get into, like, it's really, and I've always, felt that personally, that it's nothing to do with me. Like, it's not about my lifespan. It's not about what I can achieve in my time. I'm just starting a process and trying to get some sort of a ball rolling in a certain direction. And I'm getting it wrong. The ball's stationary half the time. But if I can start it going in a certain direction, and other people and my kids or whoever can learn from a lot of the things I did, like, that's as much as we can do, I think. And, we look at the, different traditions where they made decisions, thinking about the generations to come, like, and these kind of ideas were around for a long time. We, as tribes, we would have always put the kids in the center of a decision and looked at them while we made decisions and these kind of things. Whereas all those kind of traditions in our Western world anyway have kind of been thrown out into profit margins and, kind of a globalized, dog-eat-dog world, which is doesn't really factor in the next 7 generations or this kind of stuff. So yeah, I think there's a lot of that kind of spiritual, or just that bigger, more pullback view that we need to start having for the ecosystems, for farming, for humanity. Whoever, it's a philosophy that we need to start adopting, because the short-term quick gain isn't going to last, and it's definitely causing a lot of heartache and damage to the planet. So I think, it's a very exciting time. I think we're on a cusp of huge change, and I'm hoping just to help more people on that journey, because I think us Westerners might need to pull up our socks and get stuck into a bit of hard work, because we've been living off third world countries and our access to global trade and all this stuff for not a very long time, really. It's only been a couple of generations, so it was fun while it lasts, and we might have had an easy ride, but actually, I think it's not a very good way to live, and it's not going to sustain us for much longer. So interesting times ahead.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's like, I feel like as we're talking about these principles, this is what a lot of the indigenous communities of the world have actually like aligned their lives to. They actually had a natural intuition to where they like went with the cycles of nature and respected it and gave it its space to heal itself. And, it's really the Western civilization, starting with, Europe, maybe like 1600s or so. I don't know, that's a rough approximation, but we've disconnected ourselves from nature. We stopped looking at the future of our future generations and our kids. And that's actually, that severance is also what broke us from the land, you know. But it's like, people have been doing this for thousands of years. Like, this isn't necessarily like a new concept. But now we have like modern lens to be able to recontextualize it and use it as an antidote rather than what our natural thing is. It's just amazing that it's coming back, though. Amazing that it's kind of making its way.
You know, because I grew up in a time where my dad's kind of, you know, group of people who got into organic farming would have understood, you know, or would have talked about those kind of more indigenous ways of looking after, you know, the land. But they just became a little bit too wacky for, you know, modern society. We didn't want to talk about the kind of pagan or Native Americans or the Aboriginals. It was just a bit too primitive for us. So we kind of had to modernize it into like regenerative agriculture and look back in a different lens that's a bit more kind of modern and, you know, able to, you know, integrate the kind of the current systems that are there. So, but realistically, it's just going back to, trying to think of the whole system, all its complexities, and, you know, in the holistic management, they talk about making a decision for the next 1,000 years. So, you know, if you're going to build this road, think about it for the next 1,000 years. How is that going to affect, you know? So it's the same stuff. You know, it's the exact same way. In Ireland, we had a thing called the Breton Law, which was a whole set of laws that was designed around the beehive and how the beehive functioned. And, you know, that's how pagan Irish people were kind of, you know, governed and policed. And it was crazy. Like, you know, each tree had a different meaning. And, you know, certain trees, if you cut down an oak tree, you could be hung, you know. If you didn't salute a certain tree, you could, you know, go to jail or whatever. Like, it was really extreme laws that basically kept everyone in check. Like, you couldn't do a lot of things to nature, otherwise you were in, you know, deep trouble. Whereas nowadays, you know, it's a free-for-all. You can do whatever you want to nature, and you're not going to end up in court. You're not going to end up fined, or, you know, there is obviously certain things you will, but realistically, if you have money and your own land or whatever, you can kind of do whatever you want in many ways. So it's, we had a culture here, you know, and I think we're just now reinventing it in a kind of modern context.
It's funny, here in America, if you harm nature, you typically get like a government kickback. Like, oh yeah, we like that. Yeah, you just brought profits. Not to leave on a grim note. That definitely is our time. I just want to open the floor for you. Where can people find you? Do you have other online offerings people can tune into to kind of keep updated on your process and anything of that nature?
Yeah, no, I guess I mentioned earlier, we're in the process of building a training center, and in that we're kind of doing a whole revamp of, I used to have a lot of volunteers here, but that's kind of changed. So over the next while, we're going to be, doing internships again and trainings through our new training center. But you can follow us on our Moyhill Farm, you know, social media, or Facebook and Instagram mainly. My wife does that side of things. I'm really looking forward to involving people on the journey. Probably from next year, we'll hopefully have this center being built. I'll then start really, you know, putting out there more kind of material around, what we're doing in the regenerative agriculture world. And if anyone's ever here in Ireland, you can come by. We have a farm shop that's open, and we've got a few markets, but otherwise, we'll have our website and social media, and you can keep an eye. But it's, I suppose I just invite people to go and find other regenerative farms in the area and look up the Savory Institute and some of the farms that they have on board there. And the cool thing that the Savory Institute is doing is it's linking the farms to brands. So brands that now want regenerative leather or regenerative wool are now being linked directly, you know, to farms. So, you now can find out which companies are supporting regenerative agriculture, in many ways. So, that's a really cool movement that straight away you can say, wow, that company's, backing, regenerative agriculture. So now I know I'd rather spend my money there. So that's a cool place to get involved. And yeah, that movement's really happening fast. Like, I think the companies are getting it pretty quick now that they need to be changing how they do business. So I think they're probably ahead of the farmers at this stage. We need more farms than there is companies. So yeah, so there's loads people can do, and yeah, we'll be here. I won't be going anywhere. So yeah, we'll be plugging away.
Wonderful. Yeah, I love the idea that like it's really also the consumer and how we spend our dollar too, that's really what drives the companies to seek the farms. So like creates the demand. I love that the idea of connecting, informing people like what brands to support and what farms to get connected with. Yeah, that's such a crucial step to it too.
Yeah, there's a guy on the Sabre Institute. He's a fashion designer, and he was saying how like the fashion world changes designs something like 6 times a year, and it's $1 trillion industry. It's like, absolutely crazy. So he was saying basically that as soon as more fashion designers catch on to, using regenerative leather and regenerative wool and products like this in their new designs, like the whole world, spending can be just like that overnight in a totally different way. And like he's saying, like these fashion designers have the potential of changing how people spend their money in such a huge way, in such an overnight way, that the changes are like massive. And this is the potential that's right there. Like we're literally on the cusp of those fashion designers. They're not stupid people, and they want to do the best they can do. And once that turns a little bit more in the right direction, there's just going to be 100%, support for regenerative agriculture, and people want to spend that way. And then, those industrial models are going to just be obsolete. People don't want to spend money that way. We don't want to see ecosystems collapsing. So once the money isn't going that way and it's kind of finished, farmers will very quickly follow suit. And it's, to me, we're on the cusp of a very exciting change, and we just need to try and support it and help it along in the best way that we all can in whatever area that we work in.
I love it. Wonderful. Awesome. Fergal, thank you so much. I really appreciate this. I know, like I said, it's very busy for you right now, so this has been really great for me, and I'm sure listeners as well.
Yeah,
of course. Yeah. All right. Be well. All right, friends, that was the episode. Thank you so much for listening all the way through till the end. I really do make this show for you. That was Fergal Smith. If you want to keep up to date with what he's got going on, follow Moyhill Farm over on Facebook, Instagram. I think he's on all the socials, plus the website, moyhillfarm.com, and they have a lot of ways that you can get involved there. So thank you so much. I really appreciate you. Like I said in the beginning, if you want to support the show, give us a review on Apple Podcast. That is podcast gold. Outside of that, next week we have the legendary Thomas Myers joining us on the show to talk about the fascial system and expanding emotions through body work. It is literally everything that I've wanted from this show, all neatly packaged into one episode. It is a great talk, and I'm really excited to get that one out and share that with you. So until then, that's 2 weeks out from now. I think I said a week, but it's 2 weeks. So yeah, join us then, join us tomorrow, later, whatever you want to do. I hope that you are being treated well, treat each other well, and have a great couple of weeks.